But we're going to begin today with the Trump-Putin meeting because today is the day Trump and Putin are to meet. Trump's just about to get on Air Force One, apparently, to fly to Alaska, and the hysteria only increases. Now, yesterday, Zelensky came to London for hugs. They're there, Vlad. It'll be okay, said Starmer, apparently. Now, at the time, Zelensky was doing, at the same time, he was doing all he could to make sure that the war continues. And as Afshin Ratanzi here is reporting on X, Zelensky attacking Belgorod ahead of the Trump-Putin summit to provoke Russia into massive retaliation, and also making the point that they'd begun striking residential buildings inside Russia in an attempt to provoke a major retaliation before the Trump-Putin summit. So lots of that going on. Now, a couple of days ago, the Russian embassy in London put out a statement, and it said Russia has been and remains open to resolving the Ukrainian conflict through political and diplomatic means. At the same time, we must pursue a lasting and long-term peace, which can only be achieved by eradicating the root causes of the crisis. Against this background, we note the ongoing attempts by London and some of its partners to disrupt a peace resolution of the conflict by eliminating its root causes. And one of the root causes they identify, to finish that quote, one of the root causes they identify is Britain, and rightly so. And they go on to say in their statement, this is clearly demonstrated by the statements and activity developed by the British leadership in the run-up to the Russian-American summit in Alaska. This policy once again confirms the opportunistic approach of the European capitals, which are hoping to further use Ukraine as an anti-Russian battering ram. So, but let's come on to a comedy segment in today's news. And because Britain has been pulling out all the stops to keep the war going, as the Russians hint at here, including sending the chief of the defense staff, the vastly delusional Sir Tony Radakin, to Washington to speak to the Center for Strategic and International Studies. For those of you who haven't made it through one of my speeches before, he said, the gist is as follows. We're in a more dangerous era, but Britain remains safe. NATO is stronger. Russia is weak. And the West has the military and economic and intellectual heft needed to buttress the global system. And the question is, what has he been smoking? Now, I want to highlight 4 points he made in his speech and get Vanessa and Mark's thoughts on them, maybe. So first, his claim that Britain has good reason to be confident in the quality of our own armed forces and intelligence services, he said, in the strength of our defence construct, and the path before us now is the right one. Second, he said NATO too should be confident in the enormous overmatch we enjoy, in Russia's weakness and Putin's dilemma, and how that should embolden our strategy of deterrence. Third, he said the return of statecraft, how our leaders prepared to use the military instrument alongside the other levers of national power to advance our collective interests. And the fourth point he made was a point on technology and the need to retain our advantage, especially with respect to artificial intelligence. So, Vanessa, maybe if I could invite a comment from you first. Assuming you've stopped laughing at this point, what do you make of that little bunch of nonsense?
It's utterly delusional. I don't really know what else to say. I mean, it's such hubris in the face of what has been happening since the start of the special military operation. I don't know if they think they're going to defeat Russia with propaganda. That's about the best I can make of that.
Yeah, I mean, it is so incredibly difficult now to comment on some of these things that these guys are saying because they're completely off their heads. But, while Radakin was deployed to wind up the US audience, former MI6 head Sir Alex Younger was deployed to the Radio 4 Today program yesterday to wind up the domestic audience. So let's just have a brief listen to what he had to say.
I think we can isolate some facts nonetheless. The first is that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, is out of his depth. He can talk, but he doesn't listen. He doesn't write stuff down. He didn't take an interpreter. So this deal, this oven-ready deal that he's presented, which apparently just requires Russian signature, is a total fantasy. And that relates to the second hard fact, which is I've seen absolutely nothing that indicates that Putin is in any way prepared to change course and resolve from his aim of total subjugation. So it's hard to be optimistic, even though, of course, we desperately want a diplomatic solution. The risks are pretty high on the downside. And the key things we need from these talks are twofold. One, that Ukraine gets in the room, and two, that we double down on the pressure we're putting on Putin, which is working. We've been pretty hopeless. Our sort of vacillation and pusillanimity actually, in some ways, encouraged Putin. We've been living in la-la land. But it's hard to overstate how different that feels now. And of course, Europe has been excluded, and that's a problem, as it is that Ukraine has been excluded. But I think they've organized to tremendous effect to add consequence to both Putin and Trump's actions. And I would go further, and this is a bold statement, and it's possibly overreaching, but I think we're getting to the point now where Europe can actually effectively substitute for the tremendous contribution the US has made. And that, of course, assumes that Trump remains ready to sell weapons and to sustain the intelligence feed.
So the question is, what's the upshot of all this nonsense rhetoric? Well, according to the Financial Times here, the upshot is European Defence Union. Europe builds for war as arms factories expand at triple speed, is their headline. Now, Alex Younger may be saying that Europe needs the United States to maintain arms supplies, or at least arms sales. But Europe seems to be working, at least the FT is saying that Europe is working as hard as they can to minimize the reliance on the United States and to maximize the taxpayer-funded profits which could be made from the war machine. To quote them a little bit here, Europe's weapons factories are expanding at 3 times the rate of peacetime, stretching over 7 million square meters of new industrial development that represents rearmament on a historic scale. They go on to say the data shows that Europe's long-promised defence revival, driven by an injection of public subsidies, is beginning to materialise not just in policy rhetoric or spending pledges, but also in concrete and steel. And Vanessa, the longer this progresses, the more I'm coming to the conclusion that this is simply a rerun of the COVID scam. So you create an enemy that doesn't really exist, because make no mistake, at least in my opinion, Russia is not our enemy unless we make it one. And then use the fear generated to justify funneling tax money into corporate interests, whether those are big pharma in one case or the big war machine in the other case. Do you think I'm wrong in that?
No, absolutely not. I would actually say that COVID was a continuation of the previous war strategy, because what has the West always done? It's created the boogeyman, whether it's had Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi or President Assad of Syria, and then create the fear factor that somehow they're threatening national security in the EU, UK, or US since 9/11, of course. So I think really it's just a continuation of the same strategy that really took precedence after 9/11.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Now, let's come to you.